Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Oh, welcome back, everybody. I'm so excited about today's guest. I've been chasing after him forever. No, that's not true. But I have been asking after him a lot, and I'm really excited to have him on today's show. I'm gonna let him introduce himself. Otherwise, I'll take up the whole show introducing him. Good guy, smart guy, friend, colleague, voice of reason, and really well regarded, well recognized talent acquisition leader. Welcome to the show, Brad Cook.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
Of course. As you know, I'm very fond of you, and I talk in effusivities. So would you mind taking a couple of minutes? We've only got 2 hours, so try to, I'm kidding. So would you, and we've only got 2 million subscribers, not yet. Okay, so would you mind taking a couple of minutes and just give the audience some context into who's Brad Cook?
Okay, where do I start? So, Brad Cook, currently the head of talent acquisition globally for Intuitive Surgical. Have been in the workforce for probably 35 plus years, but not all in talent acquisition. I come from a sales and marketing background. I'm not from around here, as you can tell. I've started to learn to roll my R's and speak American. Been in California, very American. Been in California now, second time since 2010. What else? Yeah, a geek at nature, a burner. Burning Man's not on last year or possibly not this year, so that's a struggle. But yeah, that's about me. My background before recruiting was all about sales and operations, and that's how I think as we get into these conversations, I think that'll be where there's going to be a different spin from a traditional conversation of how does someone do recruiting, because I'm not a recruiter, I'm a salesperson, but the difference is, we're not selling a product, we're selling a promise, and that's how I think I look at, the way I would think about building a recruiting function is how do we ensure we can sell the promise to everybody that we engage with. But the process of making it happen, the engine, the mince machine that makes it happen is how do we sell? How do we get people through in a really short, high quality, fast, high candidate experience time? And at the other end, if they didn't get the job, they want to come back for another round to make sure they do get it the second time. So a little bit about me.
Okay, well, that was very little. So a couple of things. Yeah, I happen to agree with everything you just said. I think recruiting is sales. So I think the sales and marketing piece has served you well. I also, you are very not contrarian, but you do have a very unique way of delivering results, and you do deliver results, and you've added value everywhere you go. So, but let's take a step back. So I don't know. I don't even know. Forgive me. I don't know where you went to college or what your academic background is, but how did you get into recruiting? How did that journey start?
So let me just start with one question is, no, I didn't go to college.
Really?
No, I started work at 15 actually. I had this dream of doing a couple of things. My uncle was a plumber. I'll go and be a plumber. Yeah, it didn't happen. I'm glad it didn't. Wanted to be a customs officer. Where'd that come from? Wanted to be on the narc squad, wherever that come from. And none of that happened. And I just fell into, I'd say, the computer industry at nearly 16 years of age as a computer operator. And did I think I was ever going to be in the computer industry? No. But by the time I went through to my 21st birthday, the company that I was with didn't really have a clear system strategy. So I'd learnt 4 or 5 different IBM mid-range systems by the time I was 21, and became a country specialist at 22. And so that's where it started, from a computer industry, and then I actually was in sales and technical support and everything around selling or pre-sales or services until 2005. And in 2002, when I moved back to California, or I moved to California the first time with Cisco, it was after the bubble burst. And the job back then was, how do we wring every bit of services revenue out of the install base? And that was a $4 billion business for Cisco. And for a good 4 or 5 quarters, the services world was supporting revenue for the company because we weren't selling product after the bubble. And I was doing business operations, which was, again, very operationally focused. How do we get more out of what we already have? Part of a leadership program back then that got me across the organization, because where I was very siloed in services. And with it, that leadership program, moved across to see a lot of other things. And Kate DeCamp, and I still thank Kate for this right today, is she was the head of HR. And I wanted to do something different. I was bored with what I was doing, and I think Kate would probably say I had an option, but I probably felt like I didn't have an option. Like, can you go and rebuild recruiting? Like, can you go over there and figure it out? And it's like, but Kate, I don't know recruiting. You can sell, and you know how to market, you know how to operationalize things. Just go and figure it out. And back in those days, Cisco was hiring 20,000 people a year in the heyday, and CSG, the McNally and a few other folks that were in that original CSG, they were gods when it comes to that. So I literally grabbed a handful of whoever was left and said, "What did you do?" And we reconsolidated from 9 business units into 1. We centralized the process, and that's how I fell into recruiting. And that was 2005, and did that as part of a broader recruiting team. And then come out of that, I moved back to Sydney at that stage in 2007. Did that for a couple of years. Took 18 months off after that and said, what do I want to do? And during my tenure of like, what do I want to do next? I started to apply for things all over the world, and that's when I really got passionate about candidate experience, because feeling it as a director on the other side at that point in time, CX really sucked. Like, we're talking big name companies and candidate experience. We didn't know it as a label back then, but it really sucked. And then, I got a long way in the interview process at Nike. And that was the clinch pin. And they came back and said, you haven't had the top job. I'd had the number 2, number 3. You'd never had the top job. And Informatica came along and said, would you come in and rebuild recruiting? And I went, absolutely. Moved back to California. And I'll say, I think things really kicked off from there, because I was able to really leverage the process work, the operational work, the selling work, and all the stuff that did at Cisco to take off. And that's been the funnest part of my career.
I love it. I've got 2 questions. The first one's a real simple one, in that I want to get your take on, because you didn't go to college, and when you see job descriptions that have a mandatory degree required, what's your take on that? That's a simple question, but you said something very early on about selling the promise.
Yeah.
And so the second part of the question is about your take on employer brand. Like, what do you think about employer brand?
Yeah.
As it relates to the candidate experience, obviously, but what do you think about that as well?
Yeah, the first one's easy. I have a visceral response to that. And I remember my first visceral response to that was an IBM. Again, I'd been working in IBM stuff for years, up until like I was 21. I was in an interview, and this guy might have been 5 or 6 years older than me, and he said, but you haven't, we've got a job that everything I had was exactly what he wanted, but he said, you haven't gone and done a degree. I went, if I'd gone back to school, I wouldn't be sitting in front of you with 5 years experience, where you can take your job. And literally got up and walked out. So I have visceral responses for people that say that you need a degree for certain things. I got a degree of hard knocks. I got a degree in life, and having a growth mindset for me makes up for a degree. Do I think about what you have to have? Do I work hard because of it? Absolutely. And for many, many years, I worked probably extra hard and beat myself up even more for not having it. but yeah, I think there's a lot of people out there that just say, I'm going to put myself out there and go for it. And then the second part, I think CX and candidate experience go hand in hand, but in some ways they're still separate. Selling the promises comes from my services background, because I'm selling a service contract. I'm selling a bit of insurance that if a Cisco network fails, you got to sell the promise of someone being there and a part being there and all that sort of stuff. And I've just taken that same approach into recruiting of how do we sell the promise, and the promise has to be congruent with the company, and so I see they go hand in hand. But again, employment branding for me is the earlier part of CX. Yeah, it's the stuff before I don't touch you as a human being or get involved with you as a human being. It's what I want to know before I'm going to even accept the email or the phone call or whatever. And then the candidate experience, yes, there's part of it that's the front end, which is very important. But then the rest of the CX is once they've touched, once they've got engaged, that process and experience all the way through has just got to be exceptional. Treat others like you want to be treated yourself. So I do see they're intertwined, but they're still separate enough that you've got to think of them separately.
All right, that's a good answer. And by audience, when he's saying CX, he means candidate experience. So, we're not exactly sure who the audience is, and we use a lot of acronyms. Brad, ATS, CRM, see you later.
I'll use the full
No,
word.
I use them with the whole point is to educate and inform. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on the show, because you're very educated and love the comment about, it's like, I forget who wrote the book, but it's like, do you want to be in the foxhole with the guy that wrote the book about war? Or do you want to be in the foxhole with the guy that was at the war, and had 5 years? And so I'm in complete alignment with you there. And I admire your candor and transparency around that. And I don't like talking out of school. And since we only have 4 million subscribers, I probably shouldn't say anything. But there's a couple other people in your peer group that shall remain nameless that are not college degreed, so to speak, but they are heads of HR. And I agree with everything you said. And that's affirming, audience. It's not the school that makes the man or the person, as my father used to say. So in any case, listen, you talked about, was that when you say computer industry, you always think, back when God was a kid and, they didn't have oxygen.
It actually was back when they...
Was it Pascal and Fortran?
It was punch cards. And
was it Pascal and Fortran, or?
It was actually RPG.
Wow.
Back in those days. And the biggest thing as a computer operator, I'm always about efficiency, and sometimes
yes, you are.
It doesn't. But back in those days, you had multi-layered carbon paper, and every month when you run the general ledger reports for the bosses, you run all these reports, and you had to split out the carbon paper between it through a decollator. Well, it's all about how can I get 5 things going at the same time. So you turn up this machine, and then it spits out. And one day, literally, must have been 400 pieces of paper across the computer room floor, plus carbon. I just did some dumb stuff as this computer operator, but they were fun times.
Audience, part of Brad's charm is I guess you don't even need to be on the show. I could just talk about you. But, he built his own e-bike. He built, if he wants to do something, he'll just go build one. And I'm like, he and I have the same birth sign, and sometimes I'm thinking, I don't know, because I'm not able to do that. And your comment about efficiency is spot on. You're one of these people where you see something, and in your mind's eye, you say, "Oh God, I could do that better. I know a way we could do that. It'll take half as long and cost a fraction of what you're paying," and then poof, off you go. And I think in large part that's been a big component to your success. Okay, so you're in TA, you converted from sales. It's not an easy job. I think a lot of people think, and everybody on the show right now knows that we get hit up a lot. Hey, my sister's cousin just got laid off. Would you spend 5 minutes talking? So, but backing up, what are some of the less obvious challenges that you have endured or weathered, or that you consistently have to overcome as a talent acquisition leader, as someone that's responsible for hiring thousands and thousands of people and have to pivot on a dime? What are some things that would be less obvious to someone that doesn't know a lot about what you do?
I think the answer to that for me comes down to operational metrics. And the reason I say that is, again, my last boss at Cisco, Don McLaughlin, was built manufacturing. And it's all about supply and demand. And he was talking about supply and demand in a HR sense, even before HR was talking about supply and demand. And I think that's the thing that's number one for me. And number two becomes anticipation. And you anticipate what's coming through what you're seeing in the data and what the stories the data's telling me. And quite frankly, that's the hardest part as a TA practitioner. And the way I think about it is, we have a transactional side of the business, which is, the production teams, the recruiters, the folks that are in the trenches, dealing with managers and candidates every single day. And then the flip side of that is I end up putting an operational hat on, is, okay, we have to do this day in and day out. And it usually is the same thing, day in and day out. So, in manufacturing sense, if you've got a consistent process, we'll automate it to make it better and more efficient. And that's where I guess both sides of my brain come out, is if I've got to do the same thing a couple of times, I'm just going to automate it so I don't have to ever think about it again. And I think that's something that I try to always talk about. And then it just comes down to is making sure you have some operational metrics that you can at least stick a finger in the air and say, this is something. I'll tell you, this week has been some eye-opening metrics around close and open rates. And as we've gone through COVID, I hadn't looked at a metric, I hadn't set up a metric to see what was going on. And looking back over a whole lot of data over a whole lot of years, thinking, what is going on? The teams are dying right now because the market has gone crazy. There's all these things, and it was a simple, wow, we've been having more acceptances for many, many years than we've had opens, which means we're always ahead. Last couple of months, it's like, oh crap, we're getting more opens than we're getting accepts because changing dynamics in the market, not having enough resources at the time because we weren't expecting the market to take off as quickly as it is. But that one metric, like on a dime, can go, holy crap, we know we have to add resources. So from there, that metric will now be a predictor. And if we ever get, anywhere near a 1-to-1 ratio, we know we're going to be having to need to add, or probably even a 1-to-3 ratio or something like that. We'll be going back to finance saying, here's what's coming, we need it ahead of time. So I always go back to metrics and data, and not all data is perfect, and it's you use what you've got at the time. And I just remember someone said to me years ago, is you always have an answer, and I said no, it's always about just having an understanding of the question you're going to ask 5 minutes before you ask it. And that's all it is, anticipation. How do you anticipate what's around the corner? And someone said to me years ago, just learn the skill of looking around corners and anticipating what it is. So I've always got plan A, B, and C in the back of my head, that if something turns to crap, I can duck and weave as we need to.
I love that. I know that traditionally we've looked at TA through the lens of kind of people, the way we organize our team, processes, and how we look at that, and technology. And I know if I were to guess, I would think that you're probably first things first is going to be process. And if true, how do you think of those other two things once you've got your processes straight? How do you think of technology and the way you organize your team?
A wise old person said to me years ago, people, process, systems, and those three are intertwined. So process number one, absolutely. People, and then the thing that I learned at Cisco was the 3 C's. Context, clarity, and competency. And it's, does everybody have context in what we're trying to do and what we're trying to deliver? Always start with that. Clarity. Does everybody really understand what their role is as part of the broader context? And does everybody have the competency to do that? And if they don't, how do we bring them along and train and educate and develop to do those things? So, those two sayings have always gone hand in hand. And then, to the org design question, I always flip it not from a TA perspective, but from an end user, the client perspective. If I'm a hiring manager, I want to be talking to someone that knows my space. So if I've got a sales recruiter trying to do, a high-tech software engineer, that's going to be talking, that's languages that is not going to match up. So for me, org alignment comes back to how do I serve the client better to make sure that I've got subject matter experts aligned to the business that understand their worlds, because software and hardware and software and sales and service, they're different disciplines. And that, I don't know whether it's always right, but that's how I've done it in the last, I guess, whatever it is, 15 years since being back in the US. And it's been around sales, services, products, G&A, and then I'll have another lens of, executive, professional, and college. And those are sort of the dimensions of everything that the structure holds. And then the operational layers below becomes, those sourcing layers. What are the operational layers? Well, strategic sourcing, employment branding as part of that operational layer, and then the TA operations. I think that's been the part of it. There are so many more people in this industry, and I even know some of the folks that you sort of referenced before. A lot of people know a lot more about recruiting than I do, because I have my go-to people of, I'm struggling, how do I deal with this? Because there is an art to recruiting, and I know who they are within my network and even within my teams, and then that's where I think the complements of the skill sets of the operational side of it and the production, and that's why my leaders, they're called production leaders. They're production of the manufacturing floor of getting the talent in and through the engine and out the other door with an offer.
Good answers. You're a data guy. Data doesn't lie. And I admire that, because you're constantly how can I improve? Where can I improve? What and I guess you're right. You are always looking around that corner.
Yeah.
Okay, let's kind of open it up a little bit. What do you think is what do you like most about your job, and what do you like the least about your job?
Great question.
What a great question. What I love most about it, it's never the same. It's never the same, especially when I'm part of a hiring process. That thrill of the kill of I'm going through recruiting for someone right now, and just the selling side of it. I love that selling side. I'm going to come back to the thrill of the kill. We've got these candidates. You're going to work for me. You just didn't know when. That sales side. So all those things I love. I love seeing the teams, especially different teams over the years, accelerate through the leverage of technology. Now, I love those things. I'm a geek, and I got that from Cisco. And even in my early days, was always about technology, and I've been that technology guy again since moving back to the States. Of how do you get more out of what you've already got through leveraging technology? So those things I love. The things I don't love comes back to the same thing. There's something always different, and the thing that probably annoys me the most, but every one of us deal with it, is lack of workforce planning, and that just makes us reactive. And it makes every TA practitioner, from the recruiter to sourcer to all the way through the chain, it makes us reactive. And if you put the sales and operations hat on, predictability drives trust. And what is it that our clients want? They want predictability. They want to know that if I throw a need out there, that the team can pick it up and predictably deliver it in X number of days with an X number of costs, with whatever. And that's the hardest part that I think, and I haven't figured it out. I think we were pretty close to it at Cisco, because there was one person, we were really split up into the different COEs. Someone was focusing on workforce planning, then sourcing, then selection, then onboarding, and I owned the selection and then eventually owned the sourcing side of it, but not sourcing as what we would know today, the geeky side of sourcing, and how some of these people find talent, I have no idea. Your hats off to those folks. But the operational side of getting people through the talent communities, the nurturing, the cultivating of those relationships over a longer period of time. I think workforce planning is probably the biggest challenge that I see we all face in the marketplace.
100%. And point to a company that does it really, really well, because I'd like to meet them.
Exactly. I think Disney does it well.
Yeah.
I think they do, but their business
Starbucks does.
30 years.
That's right. It's a little bit different when you can plan that far ahead. That mentality to be able to forecast, and even with COVID, they've had to change and go through substantial changes. I would tell you. You mentioned candidate experience.
I think just on
go ahead.
The point there is that's one of the reasons why I haven't gravitated towards smaller startups, and it's been more larger enterprises that are in that dangly teenager phase where they know they need to get mature, but they haven't hit it yet, and that's been my sweet spot. And I know I've spoken to a lot of startups over the years. It's like I'm the operational guy, so again I can visualize a lot of my peers that are that way because their experience has been in pure production recruiting. They know what levers to go and pull to go and find 500 engineers. That's why
and they love, that's the ride that they love.
Absolutely.
They love that ride. That's the adrenaline for them. It's like, I got to go 0 to 1,000 and fast, but then they get bored. To some of them, not all, but then they get to that point where they're like, not as interesting. I want to, because you've mentioned candidate experience a few times, I want to kind of get back to it. What are some of the things that you just see that we do wrong and that we could get right that are kind of simple fixes? Like things that you mentioned. I mean, you did mention if we could just treat people the way that we'd like to be treated. I mean, that's okay, stated and covered. But what are some of the things that you'd love to see firms just do a better job at?
Constant communication. If I think back to my time off days after Cisco, it was a black hole, and it was a black hole then, and I still see there's a lot of black hole today. And I've learned some bad mistakes over the years. At one company, we'd set a goal overly aggressive that says, every candidate will get a response within 48 hours. We actually got dinged. We missed a candy award that year because we'd set an expectation and it didn't hit. So we adjusted it to 5 days. And a communication can be anything. No news is bad. No news is just as good as saying, here we're moving to the next level. So that's the thing for me is as my teams have started to really understand about candidate experience, and I've been lucky to have a lot of people work for me over the years that are as passionate about CX and candidate experience as I've been, and some folks on the team have been from companies that have won a number of candies around the world. That's the big thing, and even for me right now, where I am right now, it's making sure that a candidate, if they've taken the time to apply, that we can do an automated thank you email. That's not what I'm talking about. But when you start looking at metrics of how long someone is sitting in the new status, and to those in the industry knows that means it's sitting there, that no one's looked at it, and you haven't decided if they're in or they're out, that's a black hole time.
That's right.
Let them know. Let them know. We've actually set up some different email communications that if we've had a massive influx of talent, there's at least a template that says, we've got you, we've heard from you, we've had a massive intake here, we haven't forgot about you. We'll be back to you in X number of days. So setting up those automated triggers that recruiters can still say something even though they're saying nothing. And the same thing with that, we all know that response rates from managers isn't always as fast as we would like. Same thing, if someone's sitting in that limbo of recruiter thinks they're great, we've spoken to them, we're waiting for the manager, a simple check message, hi, we're still waiting for them, we haven't forgot about you. Those things for me, no one likes to know that nothing's happening or you're in a black hole because, it all then depends on whether the person's a glass half full or a glass half empty. And I'm a half full guy, but I know during those days of outreach and hearing radio silence, it's just not a nice feeling.
That's right.
Yeah, that's one example anyway. Oh, Andrew, you're on mute.
Yeah, I love that, because it's interesting, and I think it's one of the things that makes you so successful is you're constantly like, where can I improve? Where can I get better? Your comment about Canada experience speaks volumes to who you are.
Well, I think just on that is, I've been reading lately around the whole, growth mindset versus fixed mindset, and I never put a term on it until recently. But I've always been the sort of person that I encourage everybody is break stuff. If you're not breaking stuff, you're not pushing the edges, and everybody knows I push the edges with the vendors, that's for sure. But that's where the magic comes at, is that edge.
Right.
Yeah, and the term we always used to use at Cisco is test it, fix it, blow it up. Or we've been doing it the same way for a couple of years, let's blow it up and start again anyway, because how it worked 2 years ago, especially with referrals, doesn't mean it's going to be the same now. Our market is changing so dynamically. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So dynamically. So I think I come back to that is always know who you can go to. There is no silly answer or no silly question. Leverage the network and know who to go to for that, and just be pushing boundaries.
That's right. Get out of your comfort zone. If you're not breaking any eggs, you're not making any omelets. And then I forget who said it, but I love it. If you're not failing, you're not trying, And so your comment about, look, we all want to get it right. We all want to be safe and homeostasis and on. But you do push the boundaries, and you do push the envelopes, and then you care. And this is just personal observation. I think that's what makes anyone successful, is your willingness to go above and beyond the blocking and the tackling to ensure someone got a response, right, wrong, or indifferent, because that's what you want. You treat people the way you want to be treated. And also I think you were the one that told me or taught me that, hey, Andrew, you might not be a fit today, but in 2 years, you may be somewhere else. And I want you to say, gosh, that Brad Cook or whatever, that company, he got back to me. And I love you are a half full guy. And I think we're all half full people, but I can't resist the temptation of that parable about there's 3 people at a desk and they each have a glass of water in front of them. And the first guy says, well, my glass is half full. It'd be you. And the next guy says, well, my glass is half empty. And we know plenty of those guys. And then the third guy goes, well, mine tastes like piss. And so we need to avoid those. I think I got that joke from
William, you need to take over this conversation.
So speaking of producer Bab, you've got that look on your face like you might want to interject something.
I'm really happy to follow the glass of piss story. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thanks. Nice. Well done.
Segue.
Okay, so Brad, I want to lean on your expertise and I feel like you come at all this stuff with a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of the people we've spoken to. So I worked for a company, and once a year they'd scoop up all the managers and they'd take us to some big hoedown. They'd take us to Disneyland, or they'd take us somewhere cool, and they'd have presentations and awards and lots of noise and sweatshirts and stuff. And they'd talk about the company and growth and what you can do. And, you're cheering. And I would sit there going, what company are they talking about? Because that's not how it is where I work. That's not how it happens. So it's obviously a huge culture gap where they're selling something that doesn't exist. Or maybe it exists at the store right next to HQ where they always keep it nice. So how would you address a gap like that?
I can give you a real example.
Good. We love examples.
Informatic was a fantastic company. I still have so many close friends there, and we were going through an employment branding journey, and it's not what I would think of today as like a full blown EB strategy, but it was pretty extensive, and it really worked well. And the initial content of that was about trying to understand the emotive core that we wanted to represent in the candidate base. What do we want you to feel if you're thinking about the company? And that process was brilliant that we went through. But to get to that, we had, I think there was like a dozen or so executives in the room, starting at 301, or I think it was 301 emotional words, and we cut it down to 4. When we took that out, those words didn't resonate outside of the US. Massive, massive, massive gap. So it meant that we couldn't leverage a lot of the stuff that was done here. It worked extremely well in the US. In the data, big data, big difference, big careers, like great taglines, and it really started to work, but it just didn't resonate in the US. So, I think the lesson for me is you have to make sure you've got a full lens of around the world, and one size doesn't fit all, and one word that means something here doesn't mean something, or would mean something very different in Europe versus Asia, which quite frankly does make it harder to do a true global EVP. I think that's a big lesson that I've learnt the hard way.
Andrew,
What does EVP stand for?
Employee value proposition. What is it? What is the promise? What's my promise?
You get it, and you've always gone out of your way to. It's interesting, and I did learn this from you too. It's a lot of times, I had an ad agency for a while, and I'm aware of the value and benefit of an employer brand and an EVP.
Yeah.
But I'm never not amazed when people, to your point, it's like, hey, let's have a cool slug line or tagline. And again, it's like, wait, if you say it's all, to producer Bev's point, if it's all peaches and puppies in your commercials, and I get there and it's like, here's your cell and your, here's your drool. It's like, hey, wait a minute, you said it was, and it's like, no. So brand needs to, and I heard you say this. You said it was kind of an education in brand. Andrew, brand has to be authentic. It has to be. It can be aspirational, but it can't be. You can't create a brand.
It's got to be congruent. It's got to be.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I know, especially in a competitive marketplace like it is today, where everyone's chasing after the same people, and COVID. It's a crowded, noisy space. A brand really needs to be authentic. Okay, so listen, we've gone over, so it's at this point we should pivot and go to the candidate side of the house. And you're going to forget more about how companies engage with candidates in the next 2 minutes than all of us will ever know, including the audience. So what are some kind of less obvious, here's a softball for you, but what are some things that you've noticed that have evolved over the years, whether they're pet peeves or, euphemisms, or maybe they're just, there's no truth to them. Maybe they're just perceptions that aren't, there's no substance behind them. But what are some things that come to mind to you that are less obvious to the trained or untrained eye or mind around hiring? And then we'll get into the weeds about advice and guidance you have, but it's just at a broad level. What are some observations or things that you've noticed over the years since you spent, to your point, the last 15 years up to your elbows in this very thing?
Yeah, the big things of the changes over the years, especially in the Cisco days, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Like it's all about that. When I created my LinkedIn profile, I think it was like 2007, maybe 2008. Did I think anything of it? No. But I didn't realize how valuable it was until many, many years later that, now I do want to start getting it. I want to look at opportunities. And it wasn't about what I knew, because, recruiters will find out what you know through your resume or whatever out there. But it was about who do you know in a company. And I remember I met a lot of companies sitting in Sydney looking at Asia Pacific roles of people in other companies. So, if I'm thinking and really sort of talking to a candidate pool now, it's think about how your network grows. I just remember some really weird LinkedIn invitations of like a CEO of a lawnmower company. It's like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with that. And I don't even know whether I accept that invitation. But if it was, in a sales role or a services role or HR or talent acquisition, I'd always say yes. And I always encourage everybody to think about building their networks, not about the person they're connecting with now, but who's the second degree that person knows. Because it's the second degree you want to get to. And then when you're looking for a position, it isn't about posting your job or posting your resume and finding something. It's about going to the people with a job like yours and saying, I'm on the market. So, when I left Teradata and was on the market, I went to all the people that would get calls from other people to say, I'm looking for a person that can do this job. And then they go, oh, go and talk to Brad. So that network allows you to build that, and not necessarily the first degree, but the second degree. And that takes time. So, you need to manage your network as it's an entity, and it's important, and let it grow and flex. I remember years ago when LinkedIn did that like heat map. I remember my network blew it up because I don't come from a recruiting background, so it was all over the place because it was regional, it was global, it was operational, it was TA, it was all over the place. So that's the big thing I think that's changed, and getting to some real grassroots stuff. For me, it comes back to the simple term SEO, search engine optimization. And if anybody listening doesn't know what SEO is or search engine optimization, go and Google it because they're the masters of it. And again, now I'm going to reverse what I said. It's not about who you know, it's about how you're found. And how you're found, if you backwards engineer how a recruiter finds talent, we find you in a digital space. And we find you through keywords or schools or whatever. So if you think about what are the words that someone is going to search to look for you, you make sure wherever your digital presence is, your profiles, you have plenty of those words there. And if you go and do a Google search on any topic you're looking for, you get a higher weighted average if someone pays for it. I don't think about it these days, but back in the day, I think I had the word talent acquisition VP like 11 times in my profile. So it always bounced to the top because what is a recruiter going to search on? VP talent acquisition. At Cisco, I was a director and it was called staffing. Well, that's what it was called back then. But now, so I think a simple thing in the resume or in the profile said, director of staffing, AKA talent acquisition. So again, think of it like search engine optimization. How can your profile have the words that systems are going to pick up? And I want to preface that by saying this isn't about, there's a term called black catting and white catting. This isn't about putting all these words and buzzword bingo, but it's understanding how recruiters are going to find you and the tools that they use. That's what's really important these days.
I love it.
The adage of, a recruiter spends 5 or 10 seconds looking at a resume, it's true. And they probably spend less than that now because now we have artificial intelligence and machine learning that's doing a lot of that filtering ahead of time. So you have to really be managing both sides of that equation. Who you know to get connections in a company, but also how you're showing up digitally and how you're showing up in your application digitally for systems to be able to pick you up and then resurface you. And so recruiters can rediscover you.
I love it. So I want to ask a Brad Cook kind of an interview question. And in a way, it's something that's important to you. If competency and potentiality are a continuum, when you hire, what do you hire for? Is it more towards competency or more towards potentiality?
Potentiality. It's curiosity. One of the biggest things over the years, and I always used to use Lominger cards. So Lominger card sort is all these skills, competencies, stuff like that. And we would sit down with a team, and it starts with 60 odd cards, and you break it down to 8 to 10. And that's how we used to build our interview guides. That was the cheap way to do interview guides to get everybody. You laugh because it's cool. But the biggest thing for recruiters and especially sources is natural curiosity. And it's like, I'm not getting it. How do I break something to get it a different way? So for me, if someone's got the competencies because they've been there, done that, then I want to make sure they can bring that and then apply that in a different way. What worked at one company is not necessarily going to work at another. So that's why I come back to life experiences. The very first question about a degree, it's about life experiences and how do you interpret those life experiences into something else, and then break it and then fix it.
Dude, you and just like the last 3 or 4 things you said, I just have to go back. I thought you were going to say it's not who you know, it's who knows you, which is kind of what you did say. And the easier you make it to find me, the more likely it is I am going to find you.
Right.
I also really, producer Bev chatted me and said, he didn't even hesitate. He just said potential. I think that's part of your charm. Again, your willingness to consider, because back to my foxhole, do you want to go to war with the guy that wrote a book about it? Do you want to go to war? It's like, I may have 20 years of experience, but it might just be 20 years of 1 year of experience of the same year over and over and over. And that's a great way to look at it. And it's a mindset. But I think that the net or the takeaway is, be assertive, be not aggressive, but be ambitious, be bold, be discovered, because it's literally one of those deals where you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And I especially love that you eat your own dog food. I learned that VP talent acquisition thing from you at a Smart Recruiter convention.
Well, I remember a session that you ran. Like, it was at one of the credit unions, and I'll say the kid because he was a Facebook kid. He was early in career, but he was doing sourcing, and like those conversations that I learned from him was, they were having problems of interview to hire ratios or screened, and he was rattling these different ratios, and that conversation has stuck with me for years, and I still go back to that. Okay, I need to make sure that our conversion ratios. It's not just talk about the overall funnel, but this young kid was dealing with stuff that I hadn't dealt with because they've got volume and they were trying to figure out why something wasn't working. Genius, so just learn from everybody else, because I don't have all the answers. I have opinions, but doesn't mean they're right.
Okay, so, and that's really a good point, because your humility, and by the way, humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less and being willing to go say, hey, I've told you this. The one thing I know one thing for sure. I know nothing. And then my trick question is, and I know your answer, but what's more important to you, Brad? Everything you know right now, or everything that you don't know? And I'm sure it's everything you don't know. It's funny when that switch happens, because for the longest time I had to be right. I had to be first. It was going to be my way. If I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. And now that's completely flip-flopped. And that disposition allows you to attract and engage a team that really wants to. They know if they come to you, Brad's going to consider what I'm doing, whether it's coming out of left field or right field or center field. Or
if we don't, we'll circle the wagons until we come up with a solution from every angle. Because everyone has a piece of the puzzle. That's the big point. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle, and then it's just a matter of how do you get everybody to bring the puzzle pieces together to make the picture.
And how many times have I called you and said, hey, dude, I saw this platform that says it does X, Y, and Z. Would you please look at it and just tell me if I'm, because I can't tell. And you're like, yeah, I mean, just that open-mindedness and curiosity to say, yeah, sure, I'll take a look at it. Anyways, okay, so listen, let's get a little deeper here now. So now, how about some actionable, practical feedback or guidance for someone? You're one of those rare people, and you've earned it, you deserve it, where you've got people calling you and emailing you right this second asking you to work for them. So good for you. You've earned that. But not all of us enjoy that benefit. So what are some ideas and suggestions you have for someone that's struggling right now? Not necessarily, maybe, we all have to be career coaches. So let's presume that these people know what they want to do. But what are some practical, again, actionable suggestions or ideas that you have for someone that's trying to get traction in their career search?
I'm going to sort of come back to what I said before about the search engine optimization. It's sort of got to be key. you know, as you asked in the question, you know, KFC, you know, Colonel Sanders kept coming into my head. Not because I'm hungry, but it's like, you know, however many hundred times he went out and asked for something and never got it. So, you know, you've got to have the conviction that you know what you're looking for. And if someone has a clear understanding of what they're looking for, quite frankly, I think that's the biggest challenge. Yeah. Did I ever want to be in TA? No, I want to be a freaking plumber. Well, I'm glad it didn't happen. Nothing to being a plumber, but I'm having a lot more fun doing this now. But I think it's, you know, being clear what you want, and then when you know what you want, then it's just a matter of how do you go after it. And that comes back to what I said before about, you know, people in your network or building a network that can introduce you to those things, and at the same time is how do you get found and discovered once you've applied in an organization. You really got to. I don't think there is one answer. You've really got to look at it from both sides, and ultimately they'll end up in the middle with a conversation. And then once you've got a conversation happening, then it just becomes down to, you know, a human to human, you know, communication and how that can evolve and blossom from there.
I love it. Brad, last question for me, and this is an industry question for your peers and for fellow recruiters. If you could kill, I'll just long pause it right there. If you could kill, no, I'm just kidding. If you could kill an interview question that we've used for whatever, what would it be? What's the interview tip, trick, question, bit that people do that you hate and that you'd love to see rid from the planet?
I'm not sure I have a question because I don't really think I have set questions that I use. But the one thing that I would advise people to learn not to do, and let me flip it around, learn to do, is use a STAR model: situation, task, action, result. So if someone asks you a question, answer with, well, if someone asks you a proper situational question, is tell me a time when. So answer with, during this time, here's what was happening, set the context, here's what I did, set the clarity, and here's the result. And if you, and I've seen, I think recruiters are the worst ones at that. I can count on one hand how many recruiters, and I would literally unwrap the onion skin of like, can you give me a situation? Can you give me a time when? And that's the one thing for me. If everybody just learns the basic STAR model of what it is, to always be putting the situation and task that you did and how you were involved in that, what you did. And I think everybody needs to be careful because, you know, we want to be humble and we want to, you know, use the word we in interviews, but interviewers aren't looking for what the group of you did. I'm looking for what you did as an individual in that. So at that point, you can say, yes, it was a group, yeah, it was group blah, 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 but here's what I did. Here's what I actioned during that time. And now putting my sales and operational hat back on, here's what I got at the other end. And if it served the purpose and it really did what you were aimed for, great. If it didn't, then that's a learning that you'll take into the next one. So that's one piece of advice that you know, all of the interview preparation stuff that I've created over the years for different companies to send out to them when someone's preparing for a company interview always leads with STAR.
That's a good, you mentioned that before, situation, task, action, result,
Yeah.
and then you tell a little story within. The other thing you said that it's impossible to overstate the importance of it is just to own your story or own, you know, I think a lot of times in an audience, I'm just, you know, I'm projecting my own experience and or my own approach is that I want the job, right? I want you to like me. I want you to hire me. So I tell you what I think you want me to hear. And I end up coming off inauthentic, number one. And then I'm like bouncing around. And then it's like, it just doesn't land. Whereas if I just come in and I say, you know what, to your point, Brad, I want to be a plumber. Like, just give me a sink and a plunger and a wrench, and keep your hands and feet away from my mouth. And,
Yeah.
I'm willing to learn. That's so much easier to engage with than someone that's like, oh, well, I love people. I love money. I could watch it. I mean, it's like, and so, and it's hard because we get stuck in this loop of, well, should I tell them what I really think? So having a story, owning the story, and then, to your point, in telling the story in a way that kind of, just as a matter of course, illustrates specifically how I added value, or how I impacted the situation, or how I had a positive impact on the outcome.
Big thing of that, and the other word that I put in there is factual versus hypothetical.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. As someone interviewing someone, I want to know what you did, because what you did before is likely what you're going to do again.
Ooh.
Okay? Yeah, leopard doesn't change the spots, whatever. How you reacted one way in the past, yeah, people can learn, and we all learn, and we continue to change and morph every time we go. But historically, how you've done something before, human nature says, well, it worked for me then, it's going to work for me again. So that's your starting point. And as an interviewer, that's what I'm looking for. What you did, is it going to solve what you want? And this is where I'd say, as an interviewer, with the STAR model, you have to unwrap the onion skin, because so often I hear the words come out of people's mouths, well, I would do it this way. I don't want to know what you would do. I want to know what you did. And then they just rattle on. So if you find yourself, answering interview questions, I would do it this way, you're answering hypothetically, and I don't care hypothetically what you could do, because you could be the best BS artist in the world, and it doesn't mean the interviewers are going to listen to you. I want to know what you did and what you specifically did, even if you were part of a team. And those few tips, for me, it's always been you end up with a much better result. And as a candidate, you're getting to tell your story of what you've done and be proud of what you've done.
And as we've learned over the years, some of us faster than others, sometimes no is God's ultimate protection. I mean, you got to come in with your best foot forward, and if it'll either work out or it won't. But either way, it's that, the difference between a good question, not a good question or a bad question, a good decision or a bad decision. There are no bad decisions. They're all good decisions. I mean, you could argue no decision is a bad decision, but every decision takes you someplace, and indecision will get you killed, especially in Miss Pac-Man. Okay, so we're out of time. But maybe one more little kind of, just, you're such a wizard. Anything that you look for or don't look for in a candidate that it doesn't have to be a knockout question. You mentioned curiosity. You're a font of information, having your story, the STAR thing. Any other, feedback about, so I've gotten the interview, any things that you find particularly empowering or attractive or effective versus stuff that you think is, oh God, don't like, because you did that. I mean, those are that's where the nuggets live.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it's your style and it's your opinion. This is not this is about you.
I just think being a human being,
Nice.
being human,
Well,
we want to be with people that make us feel good, and that's what we want to be. And those work relationships, end up being lifelong friends. And I've had a lot of those from different companies, but it also is different over time, And it comes down to where I know I was at a time, versus, I don't know, I'm just rambling now, but
no, you're not.
The human nature side of things,
Right.
yeah.
Dude, that's the whole, one of the key tenets of the show is to pull back the veil. Because what people fail to understand is they think, that they send their resume in and there's Brad Cook going, nope, 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 nope. No, it turns out dude has a heartbeat and he cares and he wants you to be human and
he's turning red as you're doing that.
Well, and he's just as engaged and committed to hiring you as you and just as frustrated that he can't find you as you are. And it's like this. And I think that perception, if we just get one person to realize that there's a now your Instagram or Snapgram chat thing's going to blow up. How do I get connected? We should probably, okay, well, actually, no, we got to go to your awkward interview story. Anything would be great just because it's kind of our bit. So do you have anything that
I guess I call it lucky or call it unlucky, I'm not sure, but the only one that jumps out, it was we had an intern bring his mum to an interview, and when the interview feedback didn't go as well as it was, she started abusing the interviewer. Yeah. So
No, you're not understanding Billy's talent.
exactly.
You don't understand Billy's.
What it was.
they didn't get the job, did they?
No.
No.
How did you manage that?
The kid comes in, like, she actually asked if she could come and sit in, and it's like, no, you can wait here. And then the interviewer brought the kid out, and then his mum could see he wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what happened? Oh, I didn't get it. What? It was like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, you just don't understand how talented Billy is. No, I think we're pretty good at evaluating talent. Thanks.
So yeah, in some ways, I think I've been lucky. But again, it comes back to folks that have been in the game for a lot longer. We probably have a lot of other stories.
Oh, dude, I'm sure.
Hold on, Andrew. Have you ever had a weird interview question or bit yourself? So you on the candidate side.
Me,
No, Brad. The guest. The guest, Andrew. Has Brad Cook ever had a weird interview experience? I should have said it like that.
Yeah.
They don't have to mention any names. Daddy.
No, exactly. We don't need to know any of the names. But what was the weird experience?
Yeah, but it's in a positive sense.
Good.
Okay.
And I'll be a bit vulnerable here. I interviewed in Australia, and it was a role to come and build a consultancy practice for recruiting. And if someone looks at my resume, I've done a lot of different things, like changing industries. And I still remember the person's name asked me a question, and it was a really deep question, and it was, what is it that's driven you? You've done so many different things, and you've excelled at so many different things. What has driven you? Like, what has gone on? And it really hit me hard. And it was like, wow, I've never had a question like that. And it just blurted out, my dad left me at 3, and, I've been on this rampage of proving someone wrong that had never been in my life. And I've taken that through my life for years. And that was a question that I think in a lot of ways changed my perception of a lot of things growing up with in a single parent family. And then realized many years later in life of how that had driven me to do certain things. Add that, and then add, not having a degree. Yeah. So a different question, but probably not what you would have expected.
No,
but
love it. Answer.
Yeah. Now we love you more.
Yeah. Now you are going first, but again, dude, that's part of your. I think that's what that's what draws me to you, dude. I'm not ashamed to admit it. And I thought I was just going to say on the awkward interview thing, we might have to do a whole episode on that with me, because I'm pretty sure every one of my interviews is awkward. My mom would, they give the kid's mom credit for going. Like, my mom would have punted, I would hire me. Good luck. Take them. I'll pay you.
My mother would have attended, but just talked about what I've done wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So my mother would have attended and just said, because my first name's Jeffrey. She was just like, well, Jeffrey, since 6th grade, you've not been able to do blah, blah, blah. It's like, I'm trying to get a job here. You're not helping. But anyway.
All right. So listen, producer Bab's blowing up my thing saying we're over an hour, so we're over. So Brad, thank you so much. This is well worth the wait.
This has been a great way to end the
No, but it's been, well, yes. And thank you. Thank you. I'm glad that we were able to do it. Brad, how do people, again, we've only got 7 million subscribers. So how do people get in? It gets higher every time. How do people get in touch with you if they have any questions or they want to connect with you after?
I'm going to say, LinkedIn is the best way. But if you ping me on LinkedIn, be upfront. Be upfront of what you're looking for. You heard this. I've got a question. Absolutely. It's tough getting spammed basically from a lot of people. I want to connect. But then you connect and then I want to sell you something.
A lot of software vendors. Yeah.
Tell me that up front. If you got a question, great. Ask me a question, then I'll answer you. If you want to sell me something, I want to grab some time because I want to sell you something. Even though you don't think you need it, but I'm going to convince you that you do. Just be upfront.
Dude, your open-mindedness and vulnerability will continue to serve you well. Audience, reach out to Brad, but yeah, do be forthcoming. And he gets only like 1,000 emails a second. I can only imagine. Okay, everybody, that's all the time we have. Like them, subscribe. I think this is going to go out on Friday. So if that's true, have a good weekend. If it's not, have a great day. And thanks again, Brad Cook. You killed it.
Thank you, everybody. It's been really fun.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. See you later.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.